He came at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday, alone. No deacon, no wife, no buggy at the end of the lane where the neighbors could see it. He walked in from the road, and he sat down at my kitchen table, and he took off his hat and set it on the wood between us, brim up, the way a man does when he intends to stay a while. My husband was in the far field. He would not be back before noon. The bishop knew that. Everyone in that district knew what hour a man leaves for the far field in October. I was 31 years old. I had been married 11 years. I had 4 children asleep upstairs and a 5th coming that I had not told anyone about yet. And I had done one thing wrong in my whole life, one thing only. I had complained before I go any further. My name is Anna. This is Hannah the Amish girl, and I am one of the older voices on this channel. I grew up Old Order in Lancaster County, and I stayed. I stayed until I was 58. Most of the stories you hear from people like me come from the young ones who left at 22, at 25, before the weight of it settled all the way into the bones. I carried it for 4 decades. If you want the long version of what obedience costs a woman over a whole life, and not just over a season of it, subscribe, tap the like button, and tell me in the comments. How old were you when you first realized there was a sentence you were not allowed to say out loud? I read every one of them. I am slow, but I read every one. Now let me explain what a bishop actually is, because I think most people picture a pastor, a man who preaches on Sunday, shakes hands afterward, goes home to his supper. That is not what a bishop is. In an old order church district, usually 25 to 35 families, everyone within buggy distance of each other, the bishop is not one authority among several. He is the authority, and he is chosen by lot. That means when a bishop is needed, the men nominate candidates. Hymn books are laid out on a table. One of those books has a slip of paper tucked inside it, and whichever man picks up that book is bishop for life. There is no training. There is no seminary. There is no interview, no vote, no term, no review, and no removal except by death or by a scandal so enormous the whole community cannot look away from it. And the lot is not understood to be chance. The lot is understood to be God's hand reaching down into that room in front of everyone and choosing. Try to argue with a man like that. Try to say, I think you are wrong about this, to a man that God himself selected in front of your father and your husband and every soul you have ever eaten a meal with. The bishop decides what the ordinance says, the unwritten code that governs everything, the width of a hat brim, the color of a buggy, how a woman pins her dress. He decides who is baptized and who waits another year. He decides whether a marriage may take place at all. He decides what counts as sin and what counts as merely unwise, and those are not the same thing, and only he knows the border between them. He decides who is placed under the ban, and he decides when or whether the ban is lifted. He performs meidung, the shunning, and he performs the restoration. He holds the key on both sides of the same door. And he does one more thing, and this is the part that nobody outside the community ever hears about. He counsels privately. There is no rule in the ordinance that says a bishop may not sit alone in a kitchen with a woman whose husband is in the field. There is no rule requiring a second man be present. There is no rule that a wife may bring her sister, or her mother, or anyone at all. There is no written record kept of what is said. There is no note in a file, because there is no file, and there is no bishop above the bishop to whom she may appeal. Here is what people outside do not understand. It is not that we had a system with a loophole in it. It is that on this particular question there was no system at all. There was only a man and a woman and a kitchen and the entire weight of God pressing down on one side of that table. I want to tell you what I complained about, because I think right now you are imagining something enormous. It was not enormous. My husband had a temper about money, not about me, about money. He would come in from the barn and put both hands flat on the table and go very quiet. And the children learned to take themselves out of the room without being told. And I learned to stand very still by the stove until it passed. He never struck me. I want to be honest about that because I am not here to make a monster out of a dead man. He was frightened. The dairy prices were bad those years, terrible, and he had no words for fear. None. He had never once been given any. So it came out of him as a silence with an edge on it, night after night, for years. And then one Sunday after church at the meal, I said one sentence to another woman while we were scraping plates into the slop bucket. I said, "There are days I do not want to go home." That was it. That was the entire complaint. 10 words at a sink, said quietly, said to a friend. She did not report me out of malice. I want you to understand that, because this is how it actually works. And if you think there was a villain in that kitchen, you will misunderstand the whole story. She was frightened for me. She carried those 10 words home, and she did not know what to do with them. So she gave them to her husband. And her husband did not know what to do with them either. So he gave them to the deacon, because that is what a man does. And the deacon gave them to the bishop, because that is the order of things, and there is nowhere else for anything to go. Not one person in that chain intended me any harm. Every single one of them believed sincerely that they were helping a woman in trouble. That is what makes it a system and not a crime. A crime has a criminal in it. A system does not need one. A system just has a shape, and everybody moves along the shape, and the shape does the harm. 9 days later, he was at my table with his hat brim up. The first visit lasted a little under 2 hours. Let me be precise about what it was and about what it was not. He did not raise his voice, not once, not ever. He was gentle. He was, I believe to this day, genuinely certain that he was performing an act of care. He asked after the children by name, all 4 of them. He asked about my mother's hip. He drank the coffee I poured him, and he said it was good coffee, and then he set the cup down on the wood, and he looked at me, and he said, "Anna, there is something you said." And then he waited. That is the whole technique. That is all of it. He did not accuse me of anything. He simply announced that a thing existed, and then he let the silence open up in the middle of my kitchen like a hole in the floorboards. And I filled it. Of course I filled it. I filled it because the silence was unbearable and because I had been taught since I was 3 years old that the correct posture in front of that particular silence is confession. So I told him everything about the money, about the quiet, about standing still by the stove. And he listened. I want to be fair to him. He listened with real attention. He did not interrupt me once. And when I had finished, he sat with it a moment. And then he said the thing I have turned over in my hands nearly every day of my life since. He said, "A wife who is discontented makes a husband hard. You have been given a hard husband because you have not yet learned Gelassenheit. When you learn it, he will soften. This is God's arrangement. You are being taught, and he is being used to teach you. Gelassenheit, yielding, submission. the letting go of the self, the single highest virtue in my world, the word every sermon circles back to, the word carved invisibly over every doorway in that county. He had just told me, kindly, over coffee I had made him, that my husband's temper was my curriculum. And then he told me one more thing. He told me I must not speak of our conversation to my husband because it would shame him, and shaming him would make him harder, and that would be my doing as well. Do you understand what that does? He did not lock a door. He did not raise a hand. He did not break a single rule. He simply arranged the room so that every exit in it led back to me. My discomfort was my failing. Speaking of my discomfort was a further failing. Being heard about it was a failing. And the man explaining this arrangement to me was, in the eyes of every soul I had ever loved on this earth, the mouth of God. I nodded. I said, yes. I said, Denki, thank you. He came back 3 weeks later, also a Tuesday, also 7 a.m, also alone. That second visit was shorter, and it was not gentle in the same way. And he asked me questions about the inside of my marriage that I am not going to repeat into this recording. And I answered every one of them, every one, because he was the bishop, and because I was a woman who had already been told once that her discomfort was pride. I was 31 years old, and I sat at my own kitchen table in my own house, and I answered. What happened over the next 11 Sundays? I cannot carry it in 20 minutes. There are things this recording cannot hold. The names, the counting, the drawer, the dress I kept for 27 years. 3 years ago, I wrote it all down. The book is called The Sundays. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. I am not going to sugarcoat this next part. There was a woman in the district north of ours. Her name was Barbara. She was older than me, past 50 when I first knew her, and years before she had gone to her own bishop about her husband. Not about a temper, about something worse. I'm not going to put words to it here, and I would ask you not to put them in the comments either. Her bishop counseled her privately as well, and what he told her in the end was that she ought to examine whether her own coldness had provoked it. She stayed. She stayed 30 more years. I sat next to her at a quilting once. She had hands like harness leather, and she never stopped moving them. Not once, not even when she was talking to you, not even when she was looking at you. And without lifting her eyes from her stitching, she said to me, "The trouble with going to the bishop is that afterward you have gone to the bishop." I did not understand her that day. I understand her now. She meant that once you have spoken, the only thing in the world that has actually changed is that now they know. The husband is still in the house. The children still need feeding. The cows still need milking at 4. The community still watches you cross the yard. Nothing has been fixed, nothing at all. But now there is a record of you in the mind of the one man who cannot be appealed, and that record reads, "This one complains." She was not warning me away from cruelty. She was warning me away from hope. She was telling me that hope was the expensive thing, the thing you would be charged for. Now here is where I have to be careful, and I want to be careful because I have watched people take stories like mine and swing them like a hammer and say the Amish are wicked. That is not true, and it is not what I am saying. That same bishop buried my father. He walked 4 miles in January to do it, and he stood in the snow, and he said the words, and his hands were purple with the cold. He gave money out of his own pocket quietly to families in that district who never learned where it came from. And I know that because I helped count it, and I never told a soul. And I am only telling you now because he is dead. When our barn roof went, 40 men were standing on it inside a week. Not one of them was paid. Not one of them was thanked, because thanking would have been strange, because it was simply the thing that you did. I have never in my life since been held by anything the way that community held me. I have never since been so completely certain that if I fell, 40 men would come. And the same structure that put 40 men on my roof put one man at my kitchen table on a Tuesday morning with his hat brim up and not one witness in the world. That is the whole thing. That is the entire thing I want you to take out of this. It was not two systems, a good one and a bad one, running side by side. It was one system. The unquestioned authority that makes a community that's strong is the exact same unquestioned authority that leaves a woman alone in a kitchen with no door in it. You do not get one without the other. They gave us the one, and they never once told us the price of it. I left at 58. My husband had been dead 4 years by then. My children were grown, and most of them still speak to me, which is more than most women in my position can say. And I will not pretend for 1 second that it is anything other than luck. The shunning came anyway. Letters returned unopened. The telephone ringing into a house where I knew exactly which chair my sister was sitting in while it rang. My grandchildren, children I had held, children I had fed, given a version of me that I would not recognize if I met her on the road. I went to a counselor in my 60s. I understand that is a strange thing for a woman like me to do. She was very young. She had a plant on the windowsill that she was slowly killing, and I liked her for that. I told her about the kitchen, about the hat on the table, brim up, about the Tuesdays, and she did not say what I had spent 40 years bracing to hear. She did not tell me he was a bad man, and she did not tell me I should have been braver. She said, "Anna, who could you have told?" And I sat there, and I went through them out loud, one at a time, and she let me take as long as I needed. My husband, no, I was forbidden. My mother, she would have sent me back to the bishop and told me to pray on the way. My sister, the same. The deacon answers to the bishop. Another bishop. There is no other bishop. There is only ever the one. The police. The police are the English, and going to the English is the one unforgivable thing. And they would have shunned me for the going, not him for the doing. I got to the end of that list, and there was nobody standing on it. And she said very quietly, "Then it was not a failure of nerve. There was no door. You did not fail to walk through a door that was never built." 40 years. 40 years I had gone to sleep believing I was a coward. I want to name the thing plainly now because I have had a very long time to find the words for it, and I have very little time left to spend on softness. They did not need to hurt us. That is what I need you to hear. Not one rule had to be broken. A bishop who never raises his hand, never raises his voice, never crosses a single line of the Ordnung. That man could still walk into your kitchen on a Tuesday morning while your husband was in the far field. And there was nothing in heaven and nothing in Lancaster County that said he might not. The power was never in what he did. The power was in the fact that there was no one above him, and no one beside me, and nowhere on this earth for a complaint to go, except back into the mouth of the woman who had made it. If you grew up in a place where the only person you could report the harm to was the person the harm came from, I see you. If you were told that your suffering was a lesson God was teaching you through the hands of the very person causing it, I see you. If you have spent 30 or 40 years of your one life believing that you were weak, when the truth is that you were standing in a room that had been built without a door, I see you. And you were not weak. You were never weak. I am 63 years old, and I am telling you that as plainly as I know how to say anything. I was not too proud to endure. I endured for 4 decades. I was simply never given a single thing to endure it with. If something in this stayed with you, tell me in the comments. Tell me the sentence you were not allowed to say. The Sundays, what 20 minutes cannot hold. Link in the description and the pinned comment. The morning is yours, if you decide it is.